Okay, we'll call the meeting to order. Welcome back to the conference room. This is kind of fun. It's been 2 years. First, we need to get a motion to approve for Linda to join us via telephone.
Aye.
Thank you, Betty. Thank you, Junior. All those in favor, please state aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? All right, welcome, Linda.
Thank you.
Just let us know if you can't hear us.
Okay.
Okay.
Thanks.
All right. So our first order of business is to approve the minutes from the February 28th meeting. Could I get a motion?
Also move.
Thank you, Betty. A second? Steve?
Again, I wasn't there, but I'll move.
Okay.
I read
All
it.
right. Are there any additions or corrections? Seeing none. All those in favor, please state aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Oh, sorry, Betty. All right. Motion carries. Next, we have informational items. Our PCAPS report. I know Becky's here. Hi.
Hi. I don't have anything to add today, but I'm happy to field any questions.
Does anybody have any questions? I saw somewhere that we're doing waived fees for pet adoptions.
Yes, so that was a temporary promotion to try to reduce the number of dogs in the kennels right before that training that we had. So I believe it was last month the board approved receiving a grant for the Dogs Playing for Life training, where we're putting dogs into play groups. In order to do that, our kennel staff had to be in that training. And so animal control officers, administrative staff, all kind of pinch hitted in their roles. And so we wanted to reduce the number of dogs that we had in the shelter, which was interestingly high for February. So, but that promotion has since ended.
Was it successful?
Very much so. Yes. Some of our longtime dogs were adopted, which we were very excited about.
So when does the program start, the planning groups?
We are in the planning stages now. We are also looking at using that funding that we were approved for to remodel some of our outdoor runs to better accommodate the playgroups. But we've already got some pieces of it going already.
Now, will this lessen like the number of volunteers needed?
No. It will, if anything, it will allow us to better use our volunteers.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Thank you very much. Next, we have our workforce report.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. So that's on page 6 in your packet, following along. Top third shows applicants for the month of February and new hires for the same month. As I say every month, just as a reminder, just somewhat because a team member was hired in February doesn't mean that was a position that was posted in February. Sometimes recruitments take more than a month, sometimes several months. Middle third of the page looks at the diversity of our workforce as it stands at the end of February. Just a quick comment on not specifically the demographics of our workforce diversity, but an update for the committee based on what we shared with you and the vice chair when we met last week to review the agenda. We've drafted a job description for the Chief Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Officer position that there's money in the budget for this year, and so that'll I've got to review that, and then it's got to go to Hate Committee to get point factored in probably the month of April. Once that happens, then we'll start the recruitment process for that position. Also, as we shared with you and the vice chair during the review of the agenda, our current management analyst position in administration is through mid-late September. We're going to be looking to actually convert that position to a line staff position. Because all the jurisdictions, whether they be counties or municipal governments that are doing DEI activities and are having some semblance of progress, are doing it with at least a 2-person staff for organizations our size or larger. A key driver for failure is to set up a 1-person department, essentially, so we want to avoid that. And so there's included in the rollover appropriation that Finance Committee will consider later this afternoon, there's money included there to fund that position for the rest of the year. And then the bottom third of the report shows separations for the month ending February. Happy to answer any questions.
So with the diversity inclusion officer, would they be responsible for hiring and helping to hire the
So,
other employee?
Two, as we're writing it, two key functional areas of the positions, internal and external. Internal is going to be focused on recruitment efforts to make the organization more reflective of our community, and training. And then the external part is working with the city's chief DEI officer to support the Joint Commission on Racial Justice and Equity and other DEI initiatives out in the community.
Great. Any questions? Okay. So we don't have any resolutions, but we do have a topic for discussion, and that is the elected official salaries. As you know, we are responsible for setting those salaries prior to the election cycle. So we have 3 positions up for this go round. Just want to jump in.
Yeah.
This is challenging only in that we're setting it for position and not the person in the position, because we don't know who that's going to be, especially if it's a challenge race. So
What did you say?
that we set the salary for the position, not necessarily for the person currently holding that position. And that's where it becomes a little more challenging, because there are certain things that you can't take into consideration, like time that they've been on the current person, because there's a chance there could be somebody new in that position. So 2 years ago, Linda and I were asking that we develop something to help us come to a more of a concrete decision on this, some metrics that we can use, some data and some logic behind when setting these salaries. So we had challenged Scott and Shauna to come up with some information to help us with these decisions.
So, thanks, Mr. Chairman. So, just as you just rolled through today, and by the May board meeting, you need to set the compensation for the 4-year term for the county clerk, the county sheriff, and the county treasurer. You also need to be setting for the next decade compensation for individual board members, committee chairpersons, and county board chairpersons. By statute, you've got to do that 180 days prior to the start of the term, so not the election, but the term itself, which for the countywide elected officials, that's December 1st. For you, it is the first Monday in December. In this case, the countywide elected date comes first, and that means your deadline is June 3rd, which means absent a special county board meeting, you need to have it done by the May county board meeting. And as you said, Mr. Chairman, we're setting it for the office. You're not setting it for the office holder. One other caveat for those of you that haven't gone through this process before, the county administrator's office, since its inception in the mid-'80s, has never once made a recommendation. We provide you all the information and analysis that you may need to make that decision, but ultimately the decision is yours. So, information that Rob and Linda asked us to pull together for your deliberations. We'll walk through a series of tables that make a bunch of comparisons, and then hopefully you'll be able to have a discussion, make some, draw some conclusions from those. So first is an internal look at things. The 3 offices that are under consideration this election cycle are at the top. We looked at trying to draw some comparisons. Size of budget, number of team members supervised, and other intangibles. A good intangible might be, as an example, for the county treasurer. You don't see in the county treasurer's budget, but she collects and distributes over $400 million of property taxes a year. So that's an intangible. There's other components that go into hay that go into the grade. And strangely enough, we've been using the hay compensation system for about 30 years. We adapted it from Caterpillar. It's not perfectly set up for public sector entities, but it's the best thing we have, and we've adapted to it pretty well. The office holders back in late 1997 and early 1998 actually wrote job descriptions for their positions, and they were point factored using hay. And so the grades that you see for the elected officials are exactly those. Those are dating back to 1997, 1998. The other caveat is at the time, and I'm pretty sure it was Dr. Brookhart, did a job description and was pointed, but as we all know, the regional superintendent of schools is not on our payroll. The current office holder is a state employee, and that's why there's nothing in the current wage column. What you see there in terms of the senior management wage scale, so that's a comparison for the appointed staff. That the minimum, mid, and max of the wage scale, we mostly use that for hiring purposes, and because throughout the course of time, over several decades, the wage scale really only moves 1/2 of whatever the annual cost of living increase is. So if the cost of living increase were 2%, the wage scale only moves 1%. So obviously that's really not kept pace with wages over time, and there are several positions across the entire organization, both in appointed and elected offices, where based on a tenure, you'll see a team member that is actually over the max, and that's simply a function of the longevity of their service to the organization. So that's the internal comparison. We also provide you with some historical information. This is for all elected officials, or at least ones that you're setting salaries for. So the top 3 are the ones that are not in the current election cycle. They'll be in the election cycle 2 years from now. Auditor, circuit clerk, and coroner. And then the bottom 3, and don't worry, I've got a separate slide that'll blow up the 3 that you currently have under consideration. But just note that treasurer and county clerk are at a wage scale that is greater than the 3 that are not on this election cycle. There's the 3 that are the historical comparison for the 3 that are currently up. You'll notice the columns are by a December 1st date, and that's for compensation purposes. All the countywide elected officials have their compensation adjusted effective December 1st, because that's the day they take office after being elected, and so their compensation always runs 12/1 through November 30th of the following year. The other thing to point out specifically, so in how the table is set up, so there's a percent cost of living increase. The cost of living increase for dollars is not the actual percentage, but obviously is the change from the prior year. In past years, the county board has chosen to give an annual service payment in lieu of a cost of living increase, so that row is denoted for you where it's applicable. There's also a row related to a state stipend. 6,500 is I believe is the maximum that could be, but that's subject to annual appropriation by the General Assembly and the governor. So in some years it could have been less than that, but that goes directly to the elected official. We don't see that, so we put what the maximum possible could be. And then under sheriff, several years ago, the board instituted a supervisor of safety amount. It initially started as $5,000 a year. It has been $15,000 a year since December 1st of 2014. Next is looking at public sector comparisons from the externally. So there are a handful of counties in Illinois that are similar in population, and so that's where we look to. We also initially looked at positions outside Illinois, so neighboring states, but we found great disparity. As an example, in Iowa, the county auditor is the election official. And so how do you compare apples to apples? So after looking at that and analyzing that as part of the information gathering for Rob and Linda, we decided to just stick with Illinois. And so where you see a blank, like as in the recorder of deeds, those counties do not have a recorder of deeds.
I have a question. So the current salaries for the 3 Peoria, does that include?
That does not include the stipend from the state.
Okay, but it includes service payments.
Correct.
Okay.
Rob and Linda also asked us to try and benchmark that somehow. So we gathered budget information, and this is not just exclusively general fund information, but this is entire financial span of control. Just as an example, the county clerk has an automation fund. That's a special revenue fund because the current officer holder has recorder of deeds responsibilities. There's a recorder of deeds automation fund as well. So we looked at all of the various funds, general and special revenue, that would be under the span of control of the elected office, added that up, and compared that to on an expense per capita basis. And that's what Table 2-2 shows here. So, as an example, the county treasurer is $2.38 per capita here in Peoria County, and in DeKalb County it's $4.08. We also, specifically to the county clerk, because not everybody has a recorder of deeds, and our county clerk does not have elections because we have an election commission. We pull elections expenses out and put, where applicable, recorder of deeds expenses in, so that at least for the county clerk, you could get as close to apples comparison as possible.
I have another question. So, according to this, Sangamon County has more population and more per capita for the sheriff.
Yes.
So that would mean that they're paying their sheriff more than we are. But according to the
But
Table 2-1,
it would mean that the sheriff's total budget is higher.
so this is budget, not necessarily payroll.
Correct. So that includes total expense or spending authority of that elected office.
Gotcha. Never mind.
Sorry for the confusion, folks.
I thought we were talking payroll.
And then last, in Table 2-3, only a handful of positions report on their websites actual expenditures. Expenditures are very easy to find, but few actually. It's a little bit harder to find revenues, and then very few, in fact, only 3 of the comparisons list the number of budgeted positions. Those being Champaign, McLean, and DeKalb County. So Table 2-3 shows, just make some comparisons for you in terms of revenues, expense, and budget positions. So Mr. Chairman, to your point, that expense per capita here. So for Sangamon County, that $113.26. That's the 22.2 million divided by the 196,000. And then county board history. This gives you, we had data back to 1996 in terms of what you decided for board members, committee chairs, and the board chair. The only thing to point out here is after every decennial census, when you go through this process, it seems like the board has done some type of a bump. And then a decade ago, the board sitting around the horseshoe at that point in time, the only notable change was you voted to increase the chairman's annual salary by $500 a year, with it now currently at $24,500. So that's the information we were able to pull together for you, Mr. Chairman. If there's questions about the data, we're happy to try and answer them. Otherwise, we'll turn it over to you for a discussion about where the committee wants to go.
Okay. And I just wanted to clarify, so one of the reasons why the board is set every 10 years is because that's when everybody is up for re-election.
Correct.
So if it's not done after the census, then it would have to be done, half of the board could be set.
Right, you would.
And then in 2 years, you could set it for the other half of the board.
Right, and so that's always been the dilemma. I mean, it's not a statutory mandate that you set it for the decade, because you could do it every 2 years, but then that means you create the opportunity where individual board members can be paid different amounts based on how each board does it every 2 years. The other thing I think to point out is after I think it was after the 2010 census, the board made a decision to eliminate the per diem, the meeting per diem that board members were receiving. So their board members used to receive a meeting per diem on top of the compensation that's shown here. And then obviously at that point in time, you used to be eligible for the Employee Health Insurance Fund as a plan participant, and eligible for IMRF. The decision, both the prior boards made decisions to remove the board from both of those. The IMRF decision was driven largely by a change in statute that said that rough equivalent, you had to sign an affidavit that affirmed you were spending roughly 20 hours a week on county board business. And if you aren't, then you're not eligible for IMRF. And that board at that time said, we're not even going to bother asking ourselves that question. We're just going to get out of IMRF.
So I just want to make sure that the committee members are understanding the information that we have here. That's my goal for today. It's not necessarily to introduce anything to vote on. We can do that at our next committee meeting. But just to really make sure that you're understanding the information that's in the packet, we need to, of course, decide whether you feel there should be an increase. One of the things that Linda and I have spoke about is with the hay system and the treasurer's grade, we feel that some factors that aren't factored into that, as far as how much money goes through the office, potentially you'll be collecting, sounds like, refuse fees for townships. I think the city has something, their docket too, don't they, for the treasurer?
Yes.
We'll work for the treasurer.
So the treasurer can probably speak to it better than I can, but there's an intergovernmental agreement between the county treasurer and the city treasurer on the city council agenda tonight that would shift property tax collection responsibilities from the city treasurer to the county treasurer. Did you get that right?
So I do know one thing, Linda and I would support increasing her grade to a 17, or not her grade, the grade for that position. Sorry, it's so hard to not put a face with the position. So that's one thing that we'll be looking at doing. Does any committee members now have any questions? Do you understand the information presented to you? Is there any additional information that you can think of that would help you with this?
So what happens? Are you going to come back with a recommendation next month?
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's our goal, is to come back with a recommendation. And in the meantime, I'll probably be reaching out to make sure that committee members are understanding everything, and if have any concerns or input before we put something together to bring to the committee. Do the electeds have any input that you feel we should consider? No? Okay. Any questions?
Right now.
Pretty good. How about you, Linda?
No, I think that you represented our discussion about this very succinctly.
Oh, thank you.
But I do agree with the changing of the score for the treasurer's position because of the added duties that will come along with it. Linda left.
Oh,
No, that was it. Made her
just
point.
dropped the mic.
The mic drop.
Dropped a mic.
All right. Okay. Well, reach out at any time to me if you guys have any questions or comments, and I'll be in touch too. Okay. All right. For miscellaneous, anybody have anything for miscellaneous? Welcome, Chairman. We're back in the conference room.
Amen.
All right. All right. Okay. We're adjourned. Thank you.